Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Montessori Show of May 2024. I am Jeanne-Marie Pinel, speaking to you live from San Diego, California. Welcome from all this big international crowd. It's always wonderful to see how global the Montessori community is. So welcome, everybody. How are you, Simone?
I'm very happy to be here again with you, Jean-Marie. I'm Simone Davies, and I'm calling in from the Netherlands. And it's lovely to see people from Romania, Malta, India, Texas, the Netherlands, and in Philadelphia. Lots of international folks. So it's very, very exciting to see you all here. So, fun topic today, Jean-Marie.
Yes, yes.
We're looking at boredom.
Yeah, we thought we would talk about this topic that comes up every once in a while, right? Parents are concerned that their children are bored, and it's a valid concern, but in my personal opinion, it's no big deal. Boredom is a good thing, right? It's a good thing. It's where we have to think outside the box, where we have to create, where we come up with ideas of how to do things. And just out of curiosity, yesterday I looked up the definition, the dictionary definition, and it is the state of being weary and restless through a lack of interest, which I thought very interesting, because then it's really about creating interest, right? Which I think that's what we do in Montessori. So
Absolutely. And maybe before we get into the topic of today, having just hinted a little bit at it, we have both recently seen the Maria Montessori film. And so maybe we can start with that. I'm curious if anyone, oh, Blue didn't get to go, so she was a little bit disappointed.
Hi, Blue.
But Jean-Marie, tell us what your impressions of the film were.
So I saw this latest film, Maria Montessori, and I forget the subtitle, earlier this year in March when I was in France. And I found it to be, a cute film. It wasn't, I guess I was expecting maybe more, because I am a trained Montessorian. I've read, all the biographies and the letters that she wrote to her father, to her son, all of this. And it was really just the beginning of her career, and more the story of her romance with the father of Mario, and more the aspect of her feminist stance, which I think we don't often talk about, and just her really, not wanting to get married and to be an independent woman and so forth. And I think there was, a lot of fictional stories in there too. There was a friendship with a French woman that was a lovely story, but I don't know the validity of it. But yeah, it was not a big, like, philosophical. I think it was a very lovely introduction of her work with neurodivergent children, and her work with in the Institute and so forth.
Yeah.
What about you, Simone? I know you saw it last night.
Yeah, I just saw it last night, and I would have loved to see her work in the schools and things like that, but it stops like just before that all starts. So I guess, yeah, that's a little bit disappointing. But on the other side, I really liked that it got into cinemas, because it basically fictionalized or made it a historical fiction in some way, right? So it took this fictional character, how she meets Dr. Montessori. She has a daughter with special needs and wants Dr. Montessori's help with her. And you get to see how Dr. Montessori works in the Institute with these children, which is actually the way that she's portrayed is a little more hands-on than we are in our Montessori classroom. So that made me feel uncomfortable, like, oh, she's making her hand right. And I'm not sure that she would have done that, but they do reference that later, saying that the special needs children needed some direction with the materials, where the children in the schools, they can do it without our assistance. We're obviously guiding them with the lessons and things. So that was interesting. And then just on a personal note, I was laughing with Jean-Marie, because when you read a book, you get an idea in your head of a character, and then when you go and see the film about them, it never lives up to your expectations because it's not how you imagine them in your head. And so we all probably, from our readings and knowledge of Dr. Montessori, all have a picture in our mind of who Dr. Montessori is. And unfortunately, the representation on the screen wasn't how I pictured her. So I was like, oh, I want her to be like in my head. So that's kind of too. But if anyone, I'd love to hear your responses in the chat below as well.
Yeah. And thank you for putting the full title. It's Maria Montessori et la nouvelle femme, meaning the new woman. So it was a lot based on that, about her, just, her feminist attitude, vis-a-vis life and womanhood and motherhood and all of that. So.
But I think you should all go see it, because the more we support the film, the more Maria Montessori name will get out more in the mainstream. So definitely see it and keep our thoughts in mind and see if you agree or disagree, and let us know.
Yeah, I'd love to know in the chat if anybody else has seen it. Just put a me or yes, or I'd love to know.
Momoko agrees with us. So you got to see it as well, Momoko? Yeah. I think that's probably common, like if for the people who've been in Montessori world for a while, you have these
right.
But I think it's just like, we want to see it in the school. That would be really fun as well.
So there just needs to be a part 2 now, right?
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be a sequel.
Oh yeah, that's a totally good idea. Okay.
Because the movie, we have this whole relationship with her son that, was very sad that she wasn't able to be with him and so forth because of, societal norms at the time. And it'd be great because her relationship with her son was pretty intense later on, right? And he was a very big part in creating a lot of the material and all of that. So
yeah, very cool. So I guess it's time to get into our topic, which is, how to deal with boredom. Should we be entertaining them, and all those kind of things. And as Jean-Marie very kindly introduced, boredom is lack of interest. And so we in Montessori love to look at our children. And I guess as an introduction, I would suggest 2 things when I think of this topic. And the first one is the preparation of the environment, because that's what our child can potentially manipulate, be interested in, get ideas for. And it doesn't have to mean that you need to go and spend any money, but we're just saying, what is there available in your space that could be of interest? And then the second is observation, because even if we feel like we know our child very well, when we observe our child very closely with these more writing down what we see rather than what you think, then we get new information on who our child is today and today and today. And so we're always then can update and see what they're interested in and how we can, plant seeds of interest so that they can then take them and discover things further from there. So Jean-Marie, is there anything else you want to add as a little introduction before we get into people's questions? You're welcome to drop questions in the chat, or you can also raise your little digital hand, which you can do by going to reactions and then adding your little digital hand that way as well, because we haven't had that many questions come in beforehand. We'll touch on 2 that came in, and then we can open it up to the rest. So Jean-Marie, any other introductions?
Yeah, for me, the idea of boredom, or when a child tells you I'm bored, it seems like it's a bad thing or a dirty word or a problematic word. And for me, I would just really turn that mindset and say, oh my gosh, you're bored. That's wonderful. That's where lots of ideas come from, right? It's like, make it that it's a good thing to be bored, because then that's when we can be in our imagination, we can be in our curiosity, we can be in this place of, what can I do, as opposed to thinking as the adult, the caregiver, the parent, that when a child tells you I'm bored, you have to come up with something of like, okay, well, let's go do this or do that. It's like, no, just say, oh yeah, sometimes I'm a little bored too. And, it just gives me time to think about what I really would like to do. So that's okay. Just take your time and you'll find something to do, right? As opposed to right away trying to, rescue the child or entertain the child because God forbid they're bored. So that's my take on boredom. Boredom is a good thing.
I have a funny example as well that I will never forget because I came across the picture recently, and Oliver and Emma we were at their grandma's house, and there's obviously not that many activities for them to do at grandma's house, and they spent the whole afternoon with a helium balloon and attaching soft toys that their grandma had to see which ones would float and which ones were too heavy and would sink. And then there was a staircase in their grandma's house that they were trying to make them go up and down the stairs. And they spent the whole afternoon. And basically, you could say they wasted their time, or you could say that was a lesson in physics and like in weight and,
Yeah.
just experimentation and collaboration and frustration, because a lot of times it didn't work. So that was a really fun example as well. And then the other day, I was just sitting on the couch and I looked out the window at the clouds and I'm like, oh yeah, do you remember when I just used to lie? We had a trampoline in our backyard and I would just lie on the trampoline and watch the clouds. And I'm like, oh yeah, that would be a great idea. But when they're bored, that's what we do, right?
Exactly.
We fill every moment. And actually, we also need space to rest and to daydream and to look at the clouds and find shapes in the clouds and all those fun things as well.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point with that, because it's really this notion of learning or remembering that having nothing to do is a good thing. Like rest is a good thing, slowing down is a good thing, and that we do not need to be perpetually going, or perpetually entertained and so forth, and to just be okay with having nothing to do or having to think about what you should do, right? So yeah.
So maybe, as there's not lots of questions flooding in, we could get the people who are here live on the call to drop in the chat their favorite things to do, in summer, to have out that your children can interact with. So maybe some we're all going to be screen-free activities, and drop your favorite things into the chat. And while we tackle the first question that came in by someone on Instagram, and they asked for some ideas for second plane children. So Jean-Marie, yes, Diana says making art. Okay, I'll come into the suggestions in a minute. Let's focus on the second plane child. Did you have any thoughts that come to your mind for the second plane child? And maybe we even should quickly do a quick overview of the planes of development, because there's people who may have done that before. Do you want to do a quick intro to the 4 planes? And then
quick intro of the 4 planes. It's really, Montessori kind of developed this idea of us looking at the first 24 years of life as these 4 planes of development that are really these peaks and valleys when we think about it. And it's also called the constructive rhythm of life, because it is about these moments where there is a lot of growth, a lot of activities, a lot of things that are happening, whether it's physically, mentally, all this. And then these moments where it's more about refining what was developed in the first plane. And so we have infancy, which is a 0 to 6, and a 0 to 3, as we know, is the unconscious absorbent mind, and then 3 to 6 is the conscious absorbent mind. So that first infancy is what we call that period of the absorbent mind. And then the second plane is more the social, and you kind of I wish I had my little graph in front of me, but because there's questions that they ask about different things in the world. And I know that for childhood is really about let me do it, right? It's about letting the child become independent and so forth. The second plane child is more interested in the social aspects of their weight.
And that catchphrase is let me think for myself. So that's the mental.
Exactly. Let me think for myself, or it's not fair. I have the quote of it's not fair for the second plane, and it's the reasoning mind. It's really that child that is asking us why all the time, right? And this is the plane of childhood. And then the 12 to 18 is adolescence. And this is don't tell me what to do, right? It's more about me trying to figure out my place in the world. It's the social mind, it's the social independence, and so forth. And then the fourth plane is adulthood or early adulthood. And that is more, what can I do? How can I be a part of society, of the community? And it's that inner mind, the kind of the spiritual and moral independence. So in a very quick overview of the four planes. And Simone, I'm sure you have more to add to it, but
well, yes, no, only just the question came in, like second ideas for second plane children, because often we focus on this first plane of development, the children who are roughly from 0 to 6 years, and then the 6 to 12-year-olds, what can we do with these children? And as Jean-Marie said, these children are starting to think for themselves, and they have, when they move into the second plane of development, the external order is not quite so important anymore, because they're focusing more on the internal kind of order of is this fair? What's right and wrong? Or the moral questions and things like that. But one big characteristics of little activity not little activities is big work, is they need lots of space. So for example, if you have quite a full living room, actually moving the furniture so you can make a big area to work, and giving them supplies like some paper, scissors, tape, stapler, that will keep like a second plane child busy for a very long time, because they can make like their own magazine about something that they're interested in. So if they're reading a story like The Famous Five, they might make a secret club, and then they're writing a magazine about that club, and they can maybe also post little things around the house and send out invitations to a secret club meeting and continue along that kind of theme. So I always find that just having some art and craft materials at the ready for 6 to 12-year-olds, you don't have to have little trays for 6 to 12-year-olds, because they're quite capable of fetching for themselves what they need. In the 6 to 12 classroom, we often also just have beautiful objects that spark their curiosity. And so again, you don't have to have everything in your home. It can be like, you might find a beautiful shell, and then that might spark their interest in going to the aquarium, or to go to the beach and collect something, or to study pollution at the sea, and it can go down a whole beach rabbit hole, based on their interests. And so what I find with children really from 3 and above, but definitely from 6 to 12, is that you're going to have to observe and see what they're interested in, so that you can then take their interests and, just spark, like they call in this second plane, they talk about sowing seeds, and you don't give them all the information. You just kind of spark their interest with curiosity, and then you let them take it further. So actually I put together like a whole list of activities based on interest, which I'll pop in the chat, which could be helpful for the second plane children as well. But for example, if they were interested in rainbows, you might want to look for a crystal that they can hang so they can make rainbows. They might want to make Play-Doh and combine all of the colors so that they make a rainbow of Play-Doh colors. And then you can take that interest like for science, or you can take it, because then they might want to say, how is light refracted? And then they might go into a scientific experiment on rainbows. Or it could be something to do with mathematics, that they're working out the curvature of the rainbow. So what I love about taking someone's interest is it doesn't just mean that they're only interested in rainbows. There's so many ways that you can cover the whole development of the child based on one interest. You can read books about rainbows for language. You can, maybe find out how many days there were days where it rained, and talk about the weather patterns and how that affects rainbows. I don't know, I'm just brainstorming. I'm sure you all can think of many more.
And what it makes me think though, Simone, is when you're sharing all of that, is the caregiver will never be bored because we have to keep up with all these questions, right? Because the second plane child is so curious. They want to know why. I remember with my son, just how many whys, and you would answer the question and it was why. They were never satisfied. It was always like, but why? Until you go like, I just don't know, but why?
I'm kind of cheeky like that. If a 3 to 6-year-old asks me, then I might give them the answer. But most of the time I said, that's a really good question. We should find it out. And then I use that because it takes longer to find out these answers. And something that we've talked about in our technology workshop that we just ran, Junnifa and I, was that so often we refer to Alexa or to Siri, or we Google something so fast instead of actually taking the time to note it in a notebook and going to the library to find out, or asking an expert. And the example that I use in the workshop for a 3 to 6 child is we always Google, like ask Alexa, what's the weather today? And how many other ways are there that you could think about the weather? And maybe we should ask the people here on the call is like, how else can we work about, think about how the weather would work just with your.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, it's beautiful. And I was sharing with Simone offline before we started. Just this week, I interviewed Erin Lochner for the Art of Parenting podcast that I run. And they are a low-tech family. And she had a phrase that I really liked, which was people over pixel. So when you are wanting to find the answer to something or all this, is think of who are the people that you can connect with. And she shared this, story of her child seeing something, by the lake, and her grandmother said, well, let's take a picture and we can, search with Google Photos or whatever. And the mother said, oh no, let's go ask the neighbor. He knows the lake really well. Maybe he can help us. And that became this whole conversation and this whole relationship with this child and the neighbor was so happy to, explain all of that. So people over pixel, I really like that expression for those curious children, right?
And to continue with the second plane child as well, the atelier is a really great idea for children who love making things. So Junnifa has in her classroom outside area an enormous table with lots of wood. There's hanging up very neatly a saw and some goggles and lots of hammers and nails and all these kind of things. And the children, even from 3 to 6, but definitely from 6 to 12, love to then create things like build their own go-karts and that kind of thing, which is great because 6 to 12-year-olds, like John Marie mentioned, are very social. So then they can work together in a group to make these kind of projects. When you mentioned like the neighbor, that connection reminds me of a friend of mine whose grandfather is an engineer and they're really into engineering. So the grandfather and the kid are working on projects that match those interests. So it doesn't feel like it always has to be you that can help them. There's often other people who respect their lives, who have more talents than us that can help. And it's very important for them to have those connections as well. So I hope that gives some ideas for the second plane child.
Yeah, and Andrea said her ideas is she walks in nature in the forest, having a snack on a blanket outside, observing plants, flowers, insects, jumping in rain puddles. Those are all wonderful things. Or Giselle says we do arts and craft. And then there is another question about
there's 2 above as well. Diana had making art, and Samsung wrote, we usually, when my daughter is bored and we're at home, I usually involve her with cooking, which is a very Montessori thing to involve them in what we're doing, whatever that is as well.
Yeah, that was my other thing is when, a child is bored at home, is like invite them into what you're doing. You probably are, busy doing something around the home. Unless, you are working at home, then that's a whole other thing. But you can, like Simone started the show is about setting up the environment for them. So if you are a parent that works from home and your child is home at the same time, it's setting up their kind of work environment where they can do what they need to be doing while you're working. But if you're not and you're doing more, housework or gardening or anything around the house, involve them, invite them in, say, oh, okay, well, you can help me if you're bored. You can, if you can't think of something to do, you're more than welcome to come help me. I would really love your help in, ironing and folding and in doing the dishes, whatever is going on, and cooking as well is a very good one. So yes, involve them, definitely. So I'm going to read the question from Giselle that I recopied because she had sent it privately, but she said it's okay to share. It's her 6-year-old who goes to a Montessori school and has been since he was 3. But last year he started saying that he didn't want to go because he was bored. And he did change to a bigger school, a Montessori charter with more children in the classroom and different dynamic. After a few months, he went back to refusing going because he is bored or doesn't like the materials. Teachers are complaining he can't focus for too long or doesn't have enough autonomy, thus is not ready for elementary, even though academically he's on target. How can we help him?
I love that question. Is Giselle on the call?
She is.
So maybe Giselle can come on down if you're interested, but you don't have to as well. But it makes me think that the teacher's role, the educator's role, is to help them build the skills that they're missing. So if they're missing skills in autonomy, then particularly if they're academically already on target, then I would be scaffolding the skills for them to work more independently. But our role is not to say, well, they're not for Montessori because they're not independent enough. It's to say some children need some more guidance, and so we'll help them scaffold that skill until we don't need that anymore. So for example, in the 6 to 12 age group, they're going to be starting to do some planning. So that child will not maybe know what to start with. So I might, as the educator, sit down in the morning or make a plan when we're going to meet to give them, to have a discussion with them, where they're up to, which things they'd like to start with, so they have a list of some of the things they'd like to work on, and then they can flow from there. So then over time, I won't need to meet them every day. It might be once a week to check in how their planning's going. And then hopefully I don't have to do that at all. But to just say, nope, they're not autonomous, I think I would be wanting to work with the school, maybe collaborating. And Giselle, the reason that I asked if you were on the call is because I would love to hear how they are at home. Do you have the same problem when they're at home or not? So
There
Giselle,
she is.
I'll ask to unmute you. Yes, perfect.
Hi, Simone and Jean-Marie. It's a pleasure to have you answer my question. Thank you so much. So I think he's about the same at home. He gets pretty distracted if he's not doing what's on his interest. But also he learns pretty fast. He grabbed like the reading and writing thing at first, so he doesn't like repetition. I think this is one of our challenges. But he grasped the concept of the materials. And then, for example, the other day I went to school to observe him. He was doing the long chain, and because it's a work that takes time and is a little bit repetitive, he gets distracted and he gets up and he walks around the classroom. And for me, that's part of the Montessori thing, that they can get up and walk a little bit and go back to work. But it does seem to not be a problem, but something that the teachers tell me we have to work on, because you should be able to be seated and focusing for longer. But at home it's the same thing. He will start something and then he will do something else, then he will come back later to finish. It's a bit of distraction as well, and he will be autonomous only if it's something of his interest. Let's say Legos, or now he's on the drawing phase. He loves to draw and do crafts. So he will be working on those things for like hours. But if I ask him, like, let's do some work or some reading or stuff like that, if I try to initiate what's he's supposed to do, he will be a little bit hesitant, and it will be a little harder for him too.
Right. Which honestly, to me, Giselle, sounds very natural and like any human being. I mean, we gravitate towards what is of interest to us. I mean, when you were describing, going from when it sounds like me, sometimes I'll do something and then I'm like, oh, nope, I want to, do something else, and not sitting through the whole chain and getting up to walk around and come back to it. Seems like he's finding his way. But that's me. If I were in the classroom, I don't know as if I would be so alarmist, as long as he's not disrupting other children who are focused. I think that's, perfectly fine. What do you think, Simone?
Yeah, I had the same kind of feeling that actually he is allowed in a Montessori classroom, and it's ideal for those children who actually can't sit still for like an hour on focusing on one thing, but they can walk around, then they can come back to the task. That he follows only his interest is kind of Montessori. So as long as they're choosing activities that meet his interest, or finding ways, if he's avoiding an area, that they are the ones that connect them to the environment, the educator, and us as their parent at home or the caregiver. So we're engaging them in a way that we know that will be interesting. So if he loves drawing right now, there's many ways that you could use that interest in drawing to draw a story. For example, if you wanted to make so for example, I would print out with my kids, because he's 6, like the comic strip paper, like just blank. And then I would draw in the first box about something that he was interested in. And then they let them take it off, and then they keep drawing, and they're writing a story, even though they're drawing it, you know? So I'm again seeing how I can use his interest in drawing that would also be to do with literacy and early, you know, creating a story, that kind of idea. So I would have a conversation with the school about getting on the same page. I'd also check if there's any technology, because I noticed that children who are on tech can be more distracted when they get to class. So Junnifa and I were discussing it, that we definitely have some children who you can tell they've been on technology when they get to class. So because technology is so like instant gratification, quick fix, fast changes, maybe our classrooms are not so interesting to them, you know? So we always try to advise families to, you know, try not to have as much screen time. And if they do, to make it more like a movie night or something like that, where it's a very special, you're sitting with them, you're choosing a slower, very intentional program. And even people say, oh, but it was on kids' YouTube. But YouTube, I think, is probably one of the worst things on the internet, because you're not picking it. It sells your children things with ads, and it immediately goes on to the next thing. And so it's very addictive. Your child might not have technology, but it's just something I would put out to anyone who's on there. Then, sorry, I took a few notes. Is that okay?
Thank you. Thank you very much, guys, for your answer.
And then the observation piece, I do this activity with the families that come to my class. We have an activity that's called Observe Your Child's Concentration. And they write down what time a child starts an activity and what time the child finishes the activity. They look at how they're using the activity. And then the most important part, I think, of the thing is what breaks their concentration. And that would be a really interesting thing for the classroom to observe, and for you to observe at home, is what's that thing that distracts them? And is it the adult, or is there something else? Because your child might actually need headphones, because it might be that like they get distracted. They may, you know, need to sit facing a wall so that they're not visually distracted. Is there a way we can change the environment so that they can concentrate better? Does that make sense? And also to track their concentration throughout the day. So there's a very famous concentration graph that Dr. Montessori talked about. The children come in, they kind of chat with other people at the beginning of the day, they come to familiar activities, then there's a false fatigue where things get a little chaotic, and then they get into their most concentration of the day. Does your child follow that kind of pattern or something different? You know, it's all observation, and then you've got facts, so you can see if we can help the environment or what skills they're missing. I also love to ask at the end of that observation as well, and how can I help build those skills? Is that everything?
Yeah. And I just dropped in the chat a little observation journal I created, if you're interested, that talks a lot about what Simone just mentioned, of what to observe and how to observe. So
Giselle, does that give you some more things to think about?
Oh, yes. I was having a hard time unmuting. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. I think that the talk with the school is going to be key on this point, because I'm just afraid that we're going to want to hold him back instead of sending him to...
I think he definitely needs to move on to the next one, because he's picking up the concepts fast, and with the repetition, the children in the 6 to 12 class repeat in a different way. They don't repeat the same process again and again. They might make a graph this time, and then the next time they might make a written report, or they might make a graphic, or, you know, so the repetition will not be the same. Like if they're going to make paper airplanes at home, they won't make the same paper airplane every time. They'll want to make lots of different paper airplanes. So the repetition looks different from 6 to 12. So that's actually something to point out to them as a marker that he should go ahead.
Right, makes sense.
And I will also add, Giselle, that if you say that you're seeing that he's picking things up and that he's, you know, moving along in understanding concepts, to me that sometimes that lack of focus and everything actually comes from being bored in the fact that I've lost interest. It's not as stimulating. It's not as engaging. So I would definitely encourage that he does move into the elementary where he's going to be like so curious and so many new things to learn and discover and so forth. So.
Well, that makes sense. Thank you so much, Jean-Marie. Thanks so much, Simone.
Of course. Thank you. Actually, this is interesting because a question came in before the call, and it just was a very simple question. It says boredom in the classroom and the toddler level, which is really interesting, right? So I work with toddlers every day. I have a parent-child class here in Amsterdam, or they come sometimes with their grandparents or a caregiver, and they come for 2 hours in the morning. And I don't think I've ever seen a toddler bored. Because they're constantly doing something. So I guess my first piece of advice to this person who sent in the question would be to observe, why are they bored? So are they walking around the classroom? If they're walking around the classroom, that doesn't mean that they're bored, because they may even just stand and observe somebody. It can actually run quite slowly in a toddler classroom where they really take some time to warm up, and they might just look like they're not doing anything, but actually you notice then a few days later that they go over to an activity they've never touched before, and they had been observing an older child to do that activity. There's a lot of movement in my classroom, so I don't have an outside space because I only run a morning program. And so I actually ended up bringing some climbing equipment into my classroom so they can practice stairs, so they can practice climbing a pickler triangle. And I also have a cozy cube because they love to hide inside the cozy cube. And as they get older, they start to socialize and practice socializing in the cozy cube as well, which is lovely. We have a comprehensive area for fine motor skills and building the eye-hand coordination. And so we're doing everything from puzzles to opening and closing basket to a lockbox, posting little sticks into a cheese grater, you know, so there's little holes in it. Then there's lots of threading activities. So I start with putting beads onto a stick, and then, which you can use a chopstick even if you don't have these sticks, then onto a thick shoelace, and then onto very thin shoelace, and just refining the ways of stacking and sorting, and lots of fine motor skills. Then I help them involved in preparing the food in our space. So we spend half an hour at least making crackers and banana and orange juice. And I sit in the middle of the tables, and I help maybe 4 to 6 children at a time making crackers. That's like amazing. And they're always interested. They go through a phase where they do that every day for like months and months, and then they'll never do it again. So once they've mastered it, then you're like, okay, I'm going to need extra challenge for those children. There's lots of practical life activities like hand washing and arranging flowers, and dishwashing. And I sit, today I sat with a child for at least half an hour while they went back and forwards refilling the bottles for the flower arranging. They weren't interested in the whole process, but they wanted to fill all the bottles, and then they, you know, so you can just see what their point of interest is. They may not be completing the whole activity, but what part of those longer practical life activities they're interested in. Then we have a beautiful area for art and craft activities. And in art and craft with the toddlers, it's definitely not about the product, but the process. So I might show them how they can use some beautiful pencils or some crayons for scribbling, and then leave them to what they like to do. Or I might show them how to do watercolor painting, and then I just have one colored tablet and a little bit of water, and then I show them how I wet the brush, put it onto the color tablet and onto the paper, and again leave them to it. But sometimes I don't even give them an official lesson. They often have seen it from other children. I would look at so the other children, there's cutting, there's gluing, there's sewing as well. So the older children are already able to sew along a line, you know, with little holes already in it. We have a beautiful language area, which has got very beautiful books, which are all based in reality, a variety of topics, and some that are board books with few words going up to longer stories for the 2.5, 3-year-olds in the group. And then the language baskets, which are classification baskets. I'm being quite comprehensive, but I'm basically saying these are all the things that children need and desire for this age group. So I hope I'm not boring anyone. But I also love talking about this topic clearly.
but I just want to interrupt you for a second, because it's hard with this question, because I don't know if this person is actually a Montessori guide in the classroom or just a parent that has observed. So I don't know if you know that.
Okay, well, we could do both. We'll finish this. We're nearly at the end of my classroom, and then we can say if you were a parent observing them, what we could else add. Thank you, Jean-Marie. And then, yeah, so you have vocabulary baskets with objects that the children can learn the names of, and then they match them to cards that are actually the same, and pictures of cards, and then just to cards. And then I have a beautiful music and movement corner as well, with lots of beautiful musical instruments for them to try. So with all of those things, there's usually not boredom. I'd look at the age span of your class for the toddlers as well, because hopefully you have a good mix of ages, because you want older children who are modeling for the younger ones. So if you had only 18 months old, it might feel quite chaotic, but they wouldn't look bored. They just would be moving a lot. You also might see like 18 months old just seem to dump everything off the shelf. And that's quite a normal part of their development, because that's how they explore the world for many children, so that you may not see their deep concentration coming in. So then just trusting the process. So I did that observation of the concentration in my classroom, and one of the parents did it 3 courses ago, and her child had less than a minute on most of the activities. And just last week, she had 10+ minutes on many activities. So trusting that the child's also developing the concentration. So, Jean-Marie, what do you think? What else would you add for the parent who's concerned about that?
Just, I think it's, again, you know, what you were saying about observation. It's seeing what is their interest, and kind of upgrading the challenges in whatever that activity is that they seem to be interested. And, you know, from your description of your wonderful environment, it's also realizing to have a variety of activities, right? Because a child is going to really go back and forth to things that are very, you know, fine motor skills to gross motor skills, or wanting to do something quiet or something more active. And so we need to have that variety in the environment for sure.
And
So
all that to say as well is that you could have all of that discovery in an outside classroom using nature. You know, you could be sorting leaves, you could be manipulating, you could do the snack time, you could do all of these things outside without buying any materials. So also just to say, like, I'm not saying they need to spend a lot of money as well, but just making sure that all the needs of the children are met. So just also going back to human tendencies, we have the need to move and the need to communicate. So those are really important, that we're making sure that those movement needs and, you know, communication needs are happening with those young children as well.
yes, definitely. So there's another question about summer camps, which I think is something that comes up a lot. Is, you know, at least here in the States, and Stephanie is in the Netherlands, but here it cost a lot of money to keep our children busy and entertained all summer long. And it's kind of this pressure that we have of, you know, all the children are going to be doing this. And Stephanie is asking, you know, is it okay to not necessarily send my 8-year-old to camp where they're going to be entertained all day, make new friends and all that, and just be at home and, you know, come up with their ideas? Personally, I would say yes, it is perfectly fine to you know, have her home with you, to maybe, you know, come up with adventures to go on together that she can come up. I mean, an 8-year-old second plane child, I'm sure, you know, has friends that she can come up with ideas of what to do, whether it's at home, at the park, in nature, and so forth. And if you know, if you want to do, you know, a week of camp here and then 3 weeks at home and things like that. But for me personally, I would definitely, if it's going to be costly, I would much rather spend that money in adventures that I would do with my child, if time permits, if I'm able to, than to, you know, than to feel kind of the financial burden of sending them off. So yes.
I think I would pretty much agree with what you said. I think I like the idea of maybe 1 week of summer camp if that fit into the budget. My favorite summer holiday trip with my children was to make the last week of the holidays really boring. And then they were just so excited to get back to school as well. So it's kind of like, don't like think, oh, it's the last week, we need to fit in all these really fun things. I go, no, that's the opposite. Like really let them have relaxed, let them have use up all their creativity, and then they're really keen to go back and see their friends. So
oh, that's fun. That's fun. So we have another question from Maham. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You're on the call. So if at any time you want to unmute yourself, that is fine. But you have a beautiful question about flow, about this notion of the experience of flow that is really, for me, this energy that you get into when you are fully focused and really engaged in the work that you are doing. Not always easy state to get in necessarily. And so she's asking, like, how do we help children get into the flow? And that so let me read the question. Or if you're on the call, please, unmute yourself. That basically that she's saying that the flow state, the guide is in a flow state as well. So I wanted to ask, in what way can the guide show herself as being in a flow state? What I can think of is by giving an enticing presentation of lessons where she can show her enthusiasm as well. Other than that, in what way can a guide help a child go into a flow state? Is she always supposed to work on the material in isolation when not giving presentation to a child? So for me, I mean, it's interesting. It's a great question. For me, flow for the guide is to just be in a state of just very focused observation. Like, I don't feel that as having been a guide in a classroom, in a 3 to 6 classroom, I was in my flow just by walking around, observing, redirecting a child, giving a presentation, just being really present. Like, that to me is what that flow is for the guide. So really showing, and not necessarily like showing obviously, but just you making a concerted effort every morning before entering that classroom, that you leave everything behind and that you enter this space as there for the children in a almost kind of meditative state where you are in your flow by observing, by knowing what the next presentation is, and so forth. So it's not necessarily having your hands on the material, because your material as the guide is the entire environment. So it might be, that you decide to clean up a shelf or help a child with something or have a conversation or give a presentation, whatever you're doing, or writing down an observation. It's your flow of being present there for the children. Hope that makes sense.
I think that's really beautiful. And the way I also see flow is self-regulated, is what we might call it today. We know this kind of terminology. So often I'm making sure that I'm in a regulated state so I can share my calm with the children. So particularly if a child's having a hard time, I'm lending my nervous system to them. And often a parent might come in and they're upset about something. And then I first lend my nervous system to them. And then I feel like they start to calm, and that helps calm their child as well. So I feel like that's on top of what Jean-Marie was saying about being very present and focused. That would be a part of that as well, because if I'm self-regulated, I'm in the moment, I'm in my body, I'm embodied, like I'm breathing with full belly breaths. I'm going calm, I'm going slowly. The way we move in the classroom can be the flow. It's almost like a dance then. I'm not the perfect dancer because I actually, you hear me, I run fast, but when I remember, I can flow and I can dance through the classroom. Sometimes I trip over and things. I'm kind of a clumsy Montessori teacher, but what I lack in grace, I make up with my heart.
And I'm sure you're in flow when you're with your parents and children in your
Totally.
environment, right? That's your flow, is being in that environment, is having your eyes everywhere, making sure things are functioning correctly and who's doing what. That's our flow.
Tashiring says, as a guide, what you both said about flow makes so much sense. Maham said, thank you so much. This was very helpful. Oh, great.
Good.
And also said, thank you for your answers. Thought so about the summer camp. So that's great. So folks, we have time for another question or two. Is there anyone on the call who would like to put up their hand and they can come on the screen to ask? Or otherwise, I would love to call on Momoko in Vienna, because I know you also have like a lot of Montessori experience. And if you had anything you would like to share, do you want to jump on, Momoko, while anyone else thinks if they have a question? Let's see if I can ask to unmute you. There's not just Jean-Marie and I.
No,
she's. Maybe you're not. Oh, yes. Ah, great.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Have you got anything from the topic of boredom?
Yes, I mean that's a really good question, because currently I'm back in the classroom working with 3 to 6 children, and boredom is not the real question. It's the fact that kids always want to have activities, or they keep on talking to you. It's like a couple of years ago, I had phases where kids were just calm and in the flow state, but nowadays, the new kids that I'm looking after, they just want constant answers, asking questions. I always say, I don't have time now, send them away. I'm in my flow state, but I have difficulty to guide them into the flow state, because I think they don't experience boredom anymore in certain families, in certain settings, because they have activities during our classrooms, after school activities. At home, I think they have programs, whatever. So I think that's something that I would love to discuss with you both. Is this the time? Is this all the computer, all the accessible information, as you already mentioned, that people Google everything when kids ask something? I always tell them, oh, I have to think about it. Well, I'm going to have to go home and look it up, and I'll come back to you with an answer tomorrow. But nowadays, people tend to answer straight away, and maybe it's something it's our time. It's something that's happening different days nowadays in classroom. I mean, that's the main thing I noticed the last couple of years.
No, and unfortunately, I think Momoko, unfortunately, I think Momoko, somebody needs to mute themselves. Yes. Sorry, somebody needs to mute themselves.
I'll just mute Momoko in case it's coming from that end. 1 second, Momoko.
Yeah, sorry about that. For me, what you're observing, I think definitely does have to do with our modern world of being in constant constant notification mode, constant that we need to be always doing something, the whole multitasking, the whole digital world. There are wonderful things about the digital world. We wouldn't be able to be with all of you here today if we didn't have technology. And we need to be careful for our children's developing mind and developing brains that, we are, it's still new. And I think we don't have even a control of it for us as adults. And it's important to be very mindful as to what we put in their hands, what we put in front of them, because I think it does. I mean, I've seen it with the children, and I haven't been in the classroom for over 10 years, but I saw it then. And I had a 3 to 6 classroom where you really, really saw who the children were that had been, maybe watching TV during breakfast, or, television in the car on their way to school. They took a long time to get into their flow, to get into focus, because they were, they had been all of these kind of stimuli had been thrown at them. So I think there is a big effort to be done from the side of the educators, the side of the parents, to really ask technology to, hold off from putting it on our children so young. So there's a lot to do for there.
I think it's such a good question, Momoko, because it actually was something that Jean-Marie and I were thinking about. Do we need to entertain our children? We were thinking about the home environment, but in the case of the educator, it sounds like they're asking you to entertain them. And our answer in Montessori is actually, no, it's not our role to entertain them. That doesn't mean that there's not times for connection where we, hang out together and we are silly and have fun, or bake, or read stories together, or watch a family movie, or go on an excursion, all those kind of things. But there's also moments where we just can have quiet work, and we're modeling that. And so I think that as guides, we can model that calm, and also that curiosity. Wow, that's a great question. Would you like to write it down to continue to explore, or shall I write it in my notebook if it's a pre-writer? And we could explore that when I have some more time. In my children's classroom, they came up with a system where they would put their hand on the lead guide's shoulder so that the children would wait, not interrupt the lesson. And so if they really waited for all the time while you finish the lesson, then you can turn to them and see if they need any help. And then Susan Stevenson once consulted in a classroom that I was in, and she said that she always wished that happened in a classroom that she was substituting in, where there was a long row of children waiting for her help. And so she would make notes of what they were asking for her help with, and then came up with a way that the environment could meet these children's needs. So for example, the child might be interrupting them to ask them to cut some more wool for the threading activity. Well, how can we set up the environment so that they can manage that themselves? So I thought that was also really wise, to actually step back, and rather than just think they're asking so many questions, like sometimes it's also giving us information about how we can set it up in ways that they're more resourceful. We can also use the older children. Wow, I'd really love to help you with that, and right now I'm busy. And I wonder if we can find one of the older children who'd love to help guide you with that. And again, the older children consolidating what they learn when they teach the younger children. So to really show them where I've actually got this enormous opportunity. We have them for 6 hours in the day. Rather than worrying about what they're doing outside of the classroom, we can really bring that calm and that different pace to our classrooms, if that makes sense. And rather than what we're not seeing, we can cultivate what we want to see, and just like, even if you just see it as a little bit more concentration, or a fewer questions, or I love that question, and maybe you can have a grace and courtesy lesson about how you interrupt, or about what happens when you have questions, where should I write them? Maybe there's a wonder wall where you put them up on the wall like they do in Brave New Learner, and they're questions that you can go into as subject topics. So I think grace and courtesy lessons could be really a good opportunity. Because you never want children to stop asking questions. So to say I'm too busy might actually shut down one of their learners' curiosity. They might think, oh, Momoko's too busy, I shouldn't ask her. And actually, we don't want that to be the case. They just don't know yet. They're just, again, telling us they don't know how to find out the answers. So I need to guide them. And then gradually I'll remove myself as the scaffold, or I'll get my assistant to help me, or I'll get an older child to help me. What else did I write down? Oh yeah, and then helping the families, you could actually maybe have a parent evening on this exact topic, and helping them to manage their schedules a bit more, to say, I'm noticing the children are coming in and they're really tired and distracted. And it would be really great if we could have their 100% energy. So maybe they just need, particularly in the first year in the classroom, just one activity a week or one play date a week, and less over scheduling. And, just to really make them realize that it has an impact. Yes, it might keep them busy, but it's having a longer term impact as well. So let me ask to unmute and see if Momoko, you wrote in the chat, we also have the same rule with putting their hand on my shoulder, and I have a cue sometimes too, but sometimes older children help too. Oh, good. Yeah. So you're already doing a lot of the things I said, but maybe it's helpful for other people who are jumping on this call.
I mean, it does work. That's true. I think the questions is not my problem, but the facts that the kids, they just talk to you the moment they see you. It's such an interesting, and if I have 31 children in my classroom, and they just keep on coming and talking and talking. It's really interesting. It's an impulse control thing, I think. They have a certain impulse and they want to say something, but I mean, this is something really new for me because 5 years ago, this wasn't a thing for me. But now it's like every day when they see me, they need to talk. They want to talk, which is fine. Just that, I just can't listen to them all the time, right? So if I tell them, oh, go look for some work or something, go around once and come back to me. Sometimes it works, sometimes it just doesn't stop. And that's why I'm thinking, what do they get bored at all? Or is it like they have to keep on going? That's
I also
also
wonder,
an issue.
yeah. I also wonder if it's
Or
COVID children who missed out on that social contact. I also wonder if it's COVID. Oh, just a minute. I'll just shut it. I wonder if it's COVID children, the social contact, that they didn't have perhaps so much conversation with other people. So perhaps it's almost like maybe actually we need to devote half an hour of our morning to conversation, because there's a need for communication, and communication is also a skill that we're all building. So that's an interesting kind of thing to think about as well. But I think coming up with some agreements in your classroom to try, like, okay, I'm finding that I'm being interrupted and I love talking with you, but maybe we can find some special time when we can have those moments for conversation, and then we have maybe a little stop and go sign. So this is when I'm available to chat, and this when it's red, then I'm not available to chat, so that they can be clear, and then you still get the communication, but you're starting to make those agreements that they're going to make in the 6 to 12 class, but you can then review it after a week. How did that go with the green and red stoplight? Okay, you found it a bit confusing. Okay, how can we make it better for everybody so that it's clearer? Or maybe there's a necklace that someone puts on and they get to talk now, so that there's just one child talking at a time. I don't know. I'm just throwing lots of ideas, but maybe they can come up with a brainstorm as well.
No, I like that idea of coming up with solutions with them, right? So that you're not constantly interrupted.
There's a few people in the chat who've said the same. Hannah says, sensitive period for the social aspects of life. I have found after COVID, children are craving social engagement with others outside their family. They long to communicate. Sonia also says, I'm wondering if this has anything to do with the pandemic and how it's impacted the lives of the children born over the last few years. And Laura said, I guess it gets harder when you have babies, toddlers that you can't really talk to about. I find toddlers even respond to the hand on shoulder as well. And yeah, Momoko said it's a great idea. Good. Well, I can't believe our hour's flown already, Jean-Marie.
Yes, it has. It has. This has been wonderful. I'm glad everybody liked our boredom topic.
And there's so many wise people on the call. Like, it's really people who've been in Montessori for a very long time. So we appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. There's lots of Montessori shows in our archives because we've been doing this for 6 or 7 years now, I think, Jean-Marie.
Yes.
They're less frequent, but we still love to see you all. So thank you, everyone, for coming to share. Any last things, Jean-Marie, that you wanted to share before we head off?
No, I will follow up with an email with the replay and then all of the links that we mentioned. We've gathered some other information, and just keep on Montessoriing. So thank you. And I'm busy with my podcast these days. I haven't created any new programs. I've just been doing a lot of interviews. So I welcome you to subscribe to the Art of Parenting podcast. And actually, I will share the interview that I did with Simone and Junnifa earlier this spring as well.
Oh yeah, and I think since we did the last show, the Montessori Child book did come out talking about Junnifa.
That's right.
Yeah, so if you haven't got it already, we have a beautiful book out now for 3 to 12-year-olds, and even a chapter on adolescents, and it's about how to bring Montessori into the home. So it's the one that is basically the sequel to the Montessori toddler. So that might be of interest to some of you folks as well. All right, everyone, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. Take good care, everybody.